We're live.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the New York City Coalition for Educating Families Together. Tonight, we will be discussing how to support children with ADD, ADHD, OCD, and OCD and autism. Yes. And we have with us some special guests, the guest of honor, and Maxwell, author of well, I'll let somebody else introduce her because we have somebody for the job. And we have Sarah Jane Wellock, and we have Letitia Thompson, Jennifer Goddard, Amy Sy, and Lourdes Jabot, our usual team. Thank you for the tech team. And you know what? I will pass it to you, Lourdes, to do the job of introducing Miss N. Maxwell.
Good evening, everyone, and it is my pleasure to have the honor of introducing to you tonight Miss Ann Wallach, licensed certified social worker, registered play therapist, is a philanthropist who has worked for over 25 years with children who struggled with not fitting in, with being different, with being labeled with disorders. She has develop a unique approach for these children, their parents and family members that allows them to shift from dismay, distress, and worry to being able to change all of that and to create a different way of being that works better for them. And grew up in a bilingual home where different was neither right nor wrong. It was just different. Prior to working with children and families directly, she worked in Washington, D.C. in national politics. She successfully lobbied for the authorization and funding for a 25 million primary prevention and early intervention program for at-risk mothers and their babies. Eager to work with children, and families, she changed direction from lobbying on behalf of kids and families to attending graduate school so that she could become credentialed to work directly with them in a clinical capacity. She worked in a variety of settings, including a residential treatment center, inpatient psychiatric hospitals, and outpatient clinic and practices. In addition to her clinical practice, and now travels around the world teaching classes and speaking to groups of parents, teachers, and psychotherapists who work with and or on behalf of children. Thank you, Miss Ann Maxwell, and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I will pass the mic to Letitia to introduce Sarah Jane Wellock, who is going to be actually our guest host for tonight. So I will not be doing the job of interviewing Miss N. Maxwell. Sarah Jane is going to do it for us. So Letitia, please introduce our other guest of honor.
Thank you so much. Sarah Jane Wellock, representing the Paris Foundation, where she is known as the Director of Fun and Magic. Sarah Jane's early career was in transformative meditation, conflict resolution, and bias awareness, including leading workshops and trainings for young people and adults and mediating multiple cases over many years. She also traveled to South Africa as part of a 4-year initiative to improve relations between the U.S. and Africa and sat in on the Truth and Reconciliation hearings. In 2007,
you're muted. In 2007, and you're muted.
The plot thickens. What happened?
Who's muting me? Who's muting me? Hey, I'm not touching anything. In 2007, after all of that, she began her profession in staffing, recruitment, and matchmaking. That's what muted me. I was starting to talk about matchmaking in San Francisco and New York City, starting with matching people and positions and leading to also matching people in romance. She currently combines multiple offerings as the founder and president of Ladybug Productions, Inc., including her work with the Paris Foundation, transformative classes, and individualized sessions. Yay, excited.
So
Welcome,
excited.
Sarah.
Thank you. I'm going to give a little context to how this whole party got started. I was here speaking on behalf of the Paris Foundation recently. Our program is still open for enrollment if anyone would like to join us on Saturday. And somebody asked, one of our amazing parents here tonight asked about students in our program with IEPs. And I mentioned, as I always mention, Anne Maxwell. Anne Maxwell, I am so grateful to you for your book and for all that you do in the world. Your book, Would You Teach a Fish to Climb a Tree, had such a profound impact on me. It's my favorite book on this topic and one of my favorite books of all time. It really showed me like who I was as a youngster, as a student, and who I still am in the world. And it also helps me work with students in the Paris Foundation. So I'm just cheering for you, Anne Maxwell. I'm so excited that we have the opportunity to talk with you. So I was, blowing you up, and then Farah, I think you said, well, could Anne come and talk to us? And thank you so much for accepting our invitation. Anne Maxwell, thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really honored and I'm really excited. So I'm just so grateful for you. Thank you.
I thought we might just start with the title. Do you want to talk about the title of your book?
So here's the book. It's called Would You Teach a Fish to Climb a Tree? A different take on kids with ADD, ADHD, OCD, and autism. And I co-authored it with two friends and colleagues, Gary Douglas and Dr. Dane Hare. But the title comes from an Einstein quote, which is, everybody is a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. Right? Welcome to the world of these kids who so often are made to feel so wrong for being who they are, when in fact there's really nothing wrong with them. They're just different, and the differences can be measured in tiny little increments to huge, monstrous differences. But the reality is nobody's right and nobody's wrong in this deal. People are just different. And these kids require different handling, different treatment, different words, different approaches, different everything. And so that's why I wrote the book, is I wanted to get this out in the world. When I worked at the residential treatment center, I worked there straight out of graduate school. And the kid that, back in the day, residential treatment was where kids went. It was really it was the second to last stop. The end of the road was the state psych hospitals. The second to last stop were these residential treatment facilities that house kids, had programs for kids who were incapable of living in a home of any kind, either intact family, foster family, adoptive family, group home. Any kid that blew out was eligible for residential treatment. This was like 30 years ago. And I heard Gary Douglas speak for the first time in 2010. And he was talking about these kids, and he said, what if there's nothing wrong with them? What if they're just different? And I cried for 3 straight days, like all those kids on my caseload that never responded to the cognitive behavioral interventions, the if this, then that, like none of that stuff worked. And I had known that it didn't work. And I knew that he managed to put into words what I'd sort of known all along. So that was the beginning of a much longer journey, but that's where the title of the book comes from.
Thank you for sharing that. That's so interesting. You mentioned Gary Douglas and Dr. Dane here also co-authoring the book, and Gary says in the book, don't define these children by their labels. You will cut off your receiving of what they have to gift you. Instead, ask a question. What is the gift they have that I am not receiving? And you talk about question in the book, and question not as a statement with a question mark, but something else. And I really appreciated that information.
Yeah, that gets a little esoteric sometimes, that like that kind of stuff. But what the book offers is a different paradigm and a different way of viewing these kids and ourselves too.
Yes.
That's kinder, and that where kids aren't made wrong for being who they are. And so they really are talented and gifted in ways that other people aren't. And one of the main things that I loved about this book is that it talks about not measuring the kids based on what they're not, but looking at who they are, and then figuring out with the kids ways that they can do things that, all kids are supposed to do from 5 or 6 to 17 or 18, sit still, shut up, raise your hand, do your schoolwork, learn the way we teach you. Don't really work with a lot of these kids.
Yeah, that's amazing. I wrote like who they are rather than who they are not, and abilities, not disabilities. Like,
right.
Would you like to expand on that even more? That's so beautiful. It gives me chills.
Well, the thing that kids who are labeled with disorders often, without making psychiatrists wrong either, like all these differences, people try to quantify them to come up with some means of understanding what it is that's going on, and then that gets sort of lost in the regimentation of the disorder, and this disorder means this thing, and they're never going to be able to do this, that, and the other thing, and they're always going to be like this and never going to be like all that stuff, all these conclusions. And what I found is that kids in particular with these quote disorders really have capacities that a lot of people don't have. And so I'll give you an example. 13-year-old that I've been working with, who was also a football player, quarterback for a championship league, was flunking math, and his mom brought him in. I didn't know why. I love these guys. I'd see him sometimes a couple times a year, sometimes not for a year or two, and then sometimes every week for a couple months to get through whatever the thing was. But that was how we rolled. And so they come in, they're both like pouting, just really mad at each other. And she goes, "He's flunking math." And I snort laughed. I said, "Danny," because he was functioning at 2 grade levels in math above the rest of the kids. And I said, "What's the deal?" And he said, "My teacher hates me." And so I had a conversation with him about his teacher. "What's your teacher like?" "Well, she hates me." "Well, what else is she like?" "She's really mean." And I said, "Does she think like you do?" And he goes, "No." And I said, "Does she teach you the way you learn?" And he said, "No." And I said, can you learn on your own and just go to class and act like you're learning the way she's teaching you? And he goes, "I don't know." And I said, "All right, so is she as quick as you?" And he goes, "No, I'm quicker." And I said, okay, cool. So here's the deal. What if you quit punishing her for not teaching you the way you need to be taught? And what if you just leave her alone, give her what she needs, do the work the way she wants you to do it, but learn the way you learn? And he said, can I do that? And I said, I don't know, can you? Well, of course he could, and this is the kind of child that would be flunked and made wrong and all that kind of stuff, when in fact, there are many other possibilities that are available for him. A lot of these kids don't learn the way they're taught. And with teachers that are really difficult and rigid and problematic and don't get that, it makes it tough on the kids. And if the kids can be invited to so here's what I said to him. What if you can give your teacher what it is that she's looking for from you without becoming who she wants you to be? Like, don't ever become somebody else that you're not to please somebody. Don't ever do that. And give her what she's asking for. Teachers want to be known to be good teachers. So let her feel like she's a good teacher. Like, quit punishing her. So he started passing math. Oh, and the deal was he'd get kicked off the football team if he was failing a class. That was his real buy-in. So he got to play another season. And the mom called me back a couple of weeks later and said, and I said, how's it going? She said, oh my God, he's not flunking anymore. He's doing better. And I said, how's he doing with the teacher? And she said, well, I don't think he likes her any better, but at least he's quit being so mean to her. And I said, cool, right? It's not about, anyway.
That's so gorgeous. And Anne, I gotta just also note your playful qualities. Like, you have this giggle, and if you get the Audible, everybody, the book is also available on Audible. I've listened to it probably 8 or 10 times. It's an amazing book.
Sorry for going on so long, but that just as an example for these kids, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think anyone would benefit from reading this book. Anne, you read the book on Audible, and you just have this giggle that I really appreciate. And I can just imagine you working so well. I mean, I see how you work with people, and I just imagine you with students, just really engaging them with.
I love the kids. I do. I really do. And the younger in my world of 32 years of the clinical practice,
yeah.
The younger they are, the quicker the change is. And here's the other thing: the change is not making them not be labeled ADD, ADHD, OCD, and autism. The change is in how they view themselves and how other people view them, and help them, teach them like that. It's never about changing them. It's about having it's almost like changing the paradigm so that you can have a different understanding about who they are, and then do what you do as a parent or as a teacher, as a whatever, encourage them, challenge them. Like
you mentioned that around, like, I'm putting this in quotes, like discipline rather than disciplining a student or a child. Like, if you do that, what will that create?
Right. Well, that's you're talking about this. It's almost like a culture of question, and instead of giving, and kids hate. I don't know about you guys. I hate being told what to do. I'm like, not doing it. My mom used to say that discovering the meaning of the word no added a purpose to my life that had previously not been there. I just like, watch me, and that's who these kids are. And so when you say, okay, you can do that if you want. What's your dad going to say? What's your mom going to say? What's the teacher going to say? What's going to happen when you go to school? What's your friend going to do? What's your sister going to say? What's going to happen? Without giving them the answer, then they get to make a choice. They get to choose whatever it is that they want to choose, and they can make stupid choices. But if you don't intervene, then it's their stupid choice. It's not yours. And Maybe they won't do it a second time. I don't know. I love kids and they're not perfect. Some of them like do really dumb stuff, but
So do
if you
we.
let them really do the dumb stuff, chances are, and you don't make them wrong for it. It's like, how'd that go?
Yeah,
right?
that's such a different take on things.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine what that would be like as a kid, as a student, receiving that kind of feedback. I think it would change everything.
There's something about who you are and how you behave. Those are two separate things. And so the work that I do with kids is never around changing who they are, ever, and making them get really clear that they don't ever have to apologize for who they are. The trick is, given their differences, helping them learn tools that are going to make it easier for them to function in a way that's going to give them more of what they want and less of what they don't want, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not a behavioral thing per se, but the focus on the change is to give them the choice about changing how they respond to rigid teachers or to little princess baby sisters or mean stepdads or whatever, like those people are never going to change. Once a princess, always a princess. Once a mean stepdad, always a mean stepdad, unless they change. But it's about maneuvering through your life in a way that makes it easier on you and everybody else, regardless of what your quote labels are. Does that make sense?
Oh, it's so gorgeous. And I'm going to open up the floor, but I'd also like to mention you and I, Anne, we talked yesterday and you'd mentioned your podcast as well.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
You said, just listen to a little piece of the first one. You can learn a little bit more about who I am. Well, I dove into all of them, okay, because they're just so compelling. And the other thing that I noticed in your podcast is that, yes, of course, you're giving that feedback and that information and that allowance and that possibility and that choice to children and also to the parents.
Yeah.
Where they get to be who they are as well.
Right, exactly. And being a parent is never about giving yourself up for your kids any more than being a kid is about giving yourself up for your parents. It's like, no, it's about being who you are and sort of negotiating that thing. And, life is complicated sometimes and nobody's perfect. And I'm in this class with a guy, I won't use the cuss words that he uses, but sometimes you come unglued, and sometimes on a Saturday, everything's just rolling along and it's all smooth. And then other times on a Saturday, you wake up in the morning and you're just mad all day long and all you do is yell. And it's like, clean it up, apologize. For how I'm sorry I talked to you like that. I had no business doing that. I'm really sorry. But you don't apologize for being who you are. And then you just move on, right? I mean, this is not a game of perfection and judgment and, this kind of stuff. No. It's like life is quicksand. You clean it up, you keep moving.
So even when you're OCD like I am, you don't have to get it perfect, Anne? Is that what you're saying?
Note to self.
Okay, I'll try to get that right.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And before we just open it up to everybody and anybody, do you have a favorite passage in the book? Or do you want to open it up randomly and read something? Or should we just dive into the questions from the rest of the group here?
I think I'm like really interactive. I love lots and lots and lots of bits of the book. Okay, one thing.
Yeah.
For all you parents, you know your child better than anybody else does, regardless of the initials after their name, regardless of their so-called expertise, regardless of how many books they wrote. You know your child better than anybody else does. And the one thing I would really encourage you to do is to trust that, even if it flies in the face of what everybody else is telling you. Just trust what you know. And when you don't know something, ask a question. So, and the question isn't geared towards getting the right answer. It's that if you know the answer, it's not a question, it's a statement with a question mark at the end of it. A question is when you're really looking for information, you're looking for a sense of what's going on. And you ask yourself, all right, what is this? Like your 10-year-old's flopping around on the floor like a fish, throwing a 2-year-old tantrum. Okay, like, what is this? What's going on here? Right? Not, oh my God, I'm a bad mom. If I were a better mom, he'd act his age. No, he's acting like a 2-year-old. So what's going on? Right? Like that. Does that make sense?
That's so gorgeous. I'm going to put the link to your podcast in the chat.
Okay.
So juicy. They're so amazing.
Yeah.
And then I'm wondering if other people here have questions. Can we receive questions from people live streaming too? I'm not certain, but I'm curious about any other questions. If not, I can keep going with Anne forever.
Well, we do have a question in the Q&A. It says, as a mother who has raised a now 20-year-old high-functioning autistic son, I more and more think we need to focus on educating the public to understand, to be inclusive of their peers. A tall order given how young adults treat each other in their quest to fit in. What does a mother do when her autistic child doesn't want to share their autism because they feel they will be treated differently, and yet can't hold down a job because the employer doesn't have the full picture? Wonderful question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And as a 20-year-old, he's still part child. You know, I don't know, this may sound really weird, but your brain isn't fully formed until you're 25. And so for those of you who have kids in their late teens, early 20s, it seem like they're not all quite there. They're not. So it really, the thing about that question that just touches my heart is hearing from that mom how much she wants her son to do well and to be happy. Mm-hmm. And then the recognition that it's not her life, it's his life. Mm. And that he's the one who really has to make the choices. And as a parent, I think one of the hardest things to do is to watch your child make a choice, and you can see where it's going to go and not get involved. You can ask a question, but not if you have any judgment attached to it, right? Not if you have a point of view about, well, yeah, are you going to talk to your boss? Are you going to let him know? Right? With that tone of, if you don't, you're nuts. And I'm not suggesting that the mom is doing that, but of all the things, I think that we want our kids more than anybody in the world to be happy and to do well. And the temptation is to get involved and to sort of, point things out and like that, when in reality, one of the most loving things you can do is let them be free to make their own mistakes. Here's the thing. I'm going to do this so that you can see. Here's your child. Here's what's going on. If you intervene here, two things happen. Your child doesn't get to work through whatever this is, because here you are all of a sudden. And then so instead of this being what's going on, all of a sudden it's between you and your child. And that's where a lot of tangling happens. So that's number one. The second thing that happens is that you lose the opportunity, the possibility of being the person that your child comes to when it gets tough, because all of a sudden you're involved and you're part of the thing now. Does that make sense? I don't know out in the stream world if you can see the hands, but just as a sort of graphic way of looking at it. So to that mom, I would just say, give yourself a big hug and wish your son the very best. Ask him if there's anything that you can do. And again, you do know him. I get just from your question, you know him better than anybody. And trust that. If you need to intervene, intervene. If you don't, don't.
Gorgeous.
Okay. Cool.
Additional questions, either live streamed or here in this group, or
I'll make a comment. My name is Amy Sai. I am a mom of 5. I all in school. I have a 17-year-old that just turned 17 this past month, who is autistic and who is legally blind and multiple disabled. And so he is an IEP student who attends a citywide program that's called a District 75 in New York City. And I'm from the Bronx, and my son's been diagnosed since birth. And it's always been tough because he was a child that was nonverbal till I believe the 4th, 5th grade. He had sensory and behavioral issues. We've gone through a lot of therapies to get to where he is now, which we're still working on. You know, he's in high school, he's in the 11th grade, and he's in an inclusive program. So he's still supported by, you know, the special ed teacher and resource room and related services and counseling, like everything he needs. On top of, you know, what our state law doesn't really provide is that when children are more than just autistic, they have these several other subgroups of different disabilities. He needs adaptive, you know, technology, adaptive furniture, and anything that's adaptive so that he can participate in his education and to really be as independent as possible. And as you see, you know, he is visually, but also intellectually, you know, very delayed. So that becomes something where he struggles. I think for my perspective as a parent and offering my opinion on how I've gone through these mountains of challenges, also as well as, you know, in my culture, and I speak this a lot about an AAPI community, any disability, especially with autism, because it's a very strong, powerful relation to what we commonly said in history was retardation. And a lot of the cultural issues, as well as the pride a lot of us parents have, is that we know how much of the challenge, but we also know how much of the talent that these kids have. I mean, they learn differently from us. They accept certain parts of their life as is, but also they know how to maneuver it. It's kind of like saying, even though I'm so like bearing around my son, because I'm like, he can't really eat much. He's very sensitive to certain textures. Like, I'm always wondering if he's really getting enough food, right? And I realized that he is getting food because if he can't speak when he was nonverbal, he was able to put some actions or even approach it. It was more of a survival skill for him. So he was capable. It was just an odd way. It was kind of a very strange way to me. But as I started to really learn through the years that this was a talent, like I never thought about it, right? And now he's, you know, he has a limit amount of vocabulary where he can hold a conversation, but it's still struggling where, you know, if you're trying to really identify what is he feeling, how is he having a good day, that is still a challenge. But I always say, like, you know, we want to, as parents, like, we want so much for our kids, right? And we're so protective because we're so motherly or fatherly that we're so scared for the real world, and that there's so much discrimination, stereotyping, there's so much bullying, right, in the community, that we're so fearful for them to even leave. Now, my son is 17, you know, he has maybe 1 year to graduate, maybe 3 more years, depending on where he is at. but I am not ready, right? Like, I'm not ready for him to really just go off and graduate and, live a life, because I know that he still needs a lot of support. But I also realize that sometimes we have to kind of adapt our own selves to what they are feeling, how they're feeling of independence. If that means like taking baby steps and just like letting them explore and adventure, and if they succeed, and if it takes them a lot longer, it'll take them, maybe 6 months or a year. But as long as we're in that milestone together, I feel like, I am succeeding and I feel proud, and I feel that every parent should give a pat on the shoulder because they have done a lot, right? Every baby step is an improvement. Every baby milestone is something big, just like when they're toddlers. And my son still is very delayed in his learning. And every day I'm like, oh my God, this is a 17-year-old who's like 5'5" and 160 pounds. Like, he's a grown kid. A lot of people in the community think that he's a teenager, but his mindset is definitely still, middle schooler. And it's challenging, right? But I think really having an open conversation, either with your family, your child that has autism, but also like the people that's going to be in that relationship, because that community, maybe seems scary talking to a boss, right? Like getting a job for your child. But I'm sure people are open when they really understand what are the challenges, how can we solve those challenges so that he can really have a job and be independent and, have his own money, right? I think at the end, we all want our kids to be happy and supported and, live a wonderful life as an adult and not be different because they have a disability or autistic.
Wow. Thank you for that. What strikes me biggest and most is, as a parent, you are also an advocate for your child. And as an advocate, you're the one that runs sort of buffer between them and the outside world, getting as many resources as you can. Back to the thing about labeling and diagnoses, they're really, you have to have the label in order to qualify for a lot of the programs. So I don't want anybody to think that I think labeling is a bad thing. It's not. It's just the meaning that people attach to it. And if you can be grateful that there is a label that's opening up a world of resources for your child, that's really cool. Amy, one of the things that strikes me is that a happy and fulfilled life for one person can be different for other people. And, what works for one person may not work for somebody else. And one of the things that I loved about what you said was encouraging your son basically to keep going and to keep reaching. And who knows where he's going to go, who knows where he's going to reach, and to remember that how you view yourself as a parent is not contingent on some superficial outside status of functioning, right? Like either independent living or being able to manage a checking account or whatever. And you're so right about the baby steps. You take baby steps, they're huge. They're actually huge steps. And a step is a step. And I guess I don't really hold much sway or much difference between a baby step and a big step. They're steps. And they're forward moving and they're always what's required, right? And so not to judge yourself for the size of the step, but really to pat yourself on the back for having the courage to make them, And then the other thing too is being so kind to yourselves. Like you're not always going to get it right. And if it doesn't work out the way you had hoped it would, I'm sorry, my dog was snoring. If it doesn't work out the way you had wanted it to, it's not bad parent. It's not bad Amy. It's like, okay, that didn't work. Well, here's the thing about parenting. What if instead of viewing yourself as a good parent or a bad parent, you view yourself as trying out stuff, right? You try stuff out for your kid. Some of it works, some of it doesn't work. The stuff that doesn't work, let it go and keep moving, right? It's like, oh, that didn't work so well. All right, now what? What else can we do here? What's another choice? What's another thing?
And you mentioned that in your podcast about the dance teacher that you had.
I know, right?
And that was so gorgeous.
Yeah. He just said I dance and I missed a step and I went, oh, and he said, wait, what's that? And I said, well, I screwed up. And he goes, no, you never screw up. You're never wrong. And here I am. And he said, you tried something out and it didn't work, right? I said, yeah. And he said, so let it go. Try something else. I'm like, mic drop. I started almost crying and he goes, okay, get going, right? He's clearly not going to be my therapist on the dance floor, but it was a moment. I love that, right? Yeah. Never wrong. You just try stuff out. Your kids aren't wrong. They try stuff out. And that goes back to this culture of anytime somebody's different, it's because they're wrong and they need to be fixed. No, they're not wrong. They're just different. And so everybody tries stuff out, and the stuff that works, you keep doing it. And the stuff that doesn't, you don't. And nothing is going to work forever. You need a big menu. You guys know that as parents, it's like what worked a nanosecond ago, all of a sudden doesn't work again with a 2-year-old or a 1.5 old. So I just want to say one thing about the lady before Amy too, about the friends and the vulnerability of letting people know what's going on with you. One of the things about autism that I don't know how many people talk about this, but people with autism, no matter where they are on the spectrum, are super, 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 super aware, like super sensitive, super tuned in, super like, the way I describe it to kids is, are you kind of like a radio tower? And they're like, yeah, right? Like that tinnitus thing of hearing the electricity, like that, super tuned in. And so a lot of the behavioral stuff and a lot of the judgments that are made against kids, for example, who don't make eye contact. Well, he's being disrespectful because he didn't look me in the eyes. No, you don't ever want to make a kid with autism look you in the eyes, because when they get the download energetically, everything that's going on in your head, right? And it's not a sign of disrespect. It's a coping mechanism, and it's a sign of self-soothing, and it's something that should be applauded and not punished, right? Does that make sense?
Chills again. Ugh,
We had ladies, we had 2 questions from YouTube.
You guys are amazing. Oh my God. Check you out. It's like, woohoo.
Well, we're live. Here. So the first was actually a comment. I'm sorry. The first was loving this conversation, as I'm sure we all are. I know I am just like, I'm taking this all in. This is such goodness here. And the actual question was from Miss Lightfoot, and it says, I wonder if access bars could be a contribution to her son. And I'm assuming she means this was during the first answer to the first parent.
Oh, is this Carla?
Hi.
So there are all kinds of modalities and tools and possibilities for these kids. So there's a self-help program, self-described self-help program called Access Consciousness that has that does body work, and one of the classes that they offer is called the bars, and if you go, we can put the the link to Access Consciousness, maybe to the bars page or something in the chat, or send it out.
Yeah.
But they're basically 32 points on the head that if somebody applies gentle pressure to them, can release a lot of stuff. And there's been some empirical research, scientific sort of conclusions that have been reached, that it is incredibly soothing for many people. And kids with autism and kids who are hypersensitive, sometimes it's successful and sometimes it's not. Some of this stuff that works with, as a way of calming kids down, chilling kids out, is riding horses, being around horses. And one of the reasons is that horse brains are a lot like kids with autism brains. Like there's a lot of space there and there's not a lot of judgment. And it's such a relief for these kids to be around that presence of kindness and no judgment and no criticism and just that. And so I know there are therapists that are equine therapists that work a lot with kids with autism. Oh God, there's so many things, you guys. I think you probably know more than I do. There are like bouncing up and down indoor trampoline sometimes works with some. Swimming, like if they like the water, is amazing. And what all of those activities do is they help brain cells rearrange and sort of knock all that that goes on all the time. Like, right, I don't know about you guys, but anytime I dive into a body of water, everything that I was thinking about just disappears and all of a sudden I'm in the water, right? And it has that effect on the brains of these kids. So try stuff out. I will see if I can put together a list and give it to Sarah Jane of some kinds of it. I'm drawing sort of a blank right now, but there's lots of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll also put your website in the chat, because
okay, cool.
You also offer a private practice. Is that correct? And
I do, but I'm licensed in the state of Colorado. So
see.
You have to live in Colorado in order to be a client of mine. And I can do workshops too. So whatever. And yeah, like that.
And you have the link to the podcast, you have the website, you could do classes, maybe not take a person on from New York.
Yeah, I wouldn't be working as your therapist. I would be working as a workshop leader.
And then, as you mentioned, there are all these other modalities. We listed Access Consciousness site in the chat as well. I know Carla and I teach the bars
cool
practices. There's so many things. Yesterday you mentioned Peter Levine's work, somatic experiencing. There are just so many modalities that can assist.
There are tons and tons and tons. And there are a lot of people that there's so much out there, you guys. And there's a lot of stupid stuff out there too. So just trust yourself. Just because they wrote a book or they have a bunch of initials after their name, trust yourself. You'll get drawn to the right people. You really will.
I think there's some other questions. Are there? Am I missing these in the chat?
There is one more question from Miss Migdalia Baez. She's asking of a good book on how to understand ADHD, if you know of any.
There are lots of books on ADHD. I'm gonna this one, for one point of view, this one, Would You Teach a Fish to Climb a Tree, is one, although it sort of talks about all four of those in a thing. There's a therapist or medical doctor, Gabor, Gabor, Mate, who's written a book on ADHD. Do you mind if I can go get it? Hold on. Do you
Yes.
guys mind if I do this? Is that all
Do
right?
your thing, Anne. Do your thing. And I'm listing your book, which I think is amazing. It does address ADD, ADHD, autism, and OCD.
ADHD. Maybe I brought it. I may have actually brought it back into my study.
It's an.
I swear to God. Here it is. Here it is. Gabor Mate. It's called Scattered Minds. And this is a different take on ADD and ADHD. Scattered Minds by Gabor Mate. I've just started reading it, and he has a really different point of view about early stuff and small t trauma, not big T trauma like catastrophic trauma, but the small t, the lack of attunement, the parental preoccupation, like whatever, like not to make anybody bad or wrong. But that's another one. What else do I have?
I see it. There's other questions coming in. I think we're closing soon, so there's lots of action happening.
Okay, we got how many minutes? 7 more minutes.
So there's attendee hand up from Susan.
Yes.
And
Can
did I
we allow
miss another
Susan
question?
to ask a question? And also, if you have the time, we can go a little bit over time. It's not a problem. If
Yeah,
if
no,
it's
I'm
okay
good.
with you.
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, unmuting Susan.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, how are you? I'm the woman who asked the first question. I just wanted to do a quick follow-up.
Oh, hi.
Hi, I really appreciated your response. My son also has high anxiety, and we actually did a bars training together.
Oh, cool.
And it was, it's just a challenge because you were really right dead on about it. I mean, he's a young adult and he's so typical in so many ways. And that is the irony of him. He presents as typical, but he is not. His processing with language is very unique.
Yeah.
And it causes many problems in his relationships and, job situations. But happily, he did get a job at a place that was sensitive to people with disabilities. But it breaks my heart as his mother because I am taking the sidelines. He asked me specifically not to share his diagnosis with people, so I stay out of it. But I watch the sidelines, and it's tough.
Yeah, it is tough. It is really tough. And whose life is it?
Yes, absolutely. It is his
Right?
life, as his father keeps reminding me.
You love him. Thanks a lot. Note to
Thank
self.
you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for saying hi. It's nice to hear you.
Thank you.
And was there other stuff, and I so rudely interrupted you, and I'm perhaps missing some other questions from other people?
I'm happy to.
I only had one. And it's really more of a comment than a question, because I don't have children who have a diagnosis or anything like that.
Right.
But as an older mother, I was scared to death by all the doctors and all the genetic testing and all this may be, right? And so I was hawking my babies as that older mom, looking for signs and clues, making sure that they weren't doing whatever they said. And as they've gotten older, they're now 8 and 10. I honestly, and it's a joke, and some of the ladies know, I say, like, if they were diagnosing when I was a child, I would have had a diagnosis, right? I would have been either ADD or ADHD, no, hands down, right? And so I look for some of those things that I know that I do that were undiagnosed, I often see in my children. It's like, okay, and you're helping me because I often want to correct it, right? Because I don't want them to grow up like me without a diagnosis, but you're still doing these things, right? I want to autocorrect. And so I appreciate you saying, like, it's not bad or wrong.
It's not.
Right. it's just, and you know what it is? The blessing of all of it, and this is the comment, is that the blessing of all of it is, you know, my children could have very well had a diagnosis because I was an older mom and, you know, they just scared me to death, right? But they did not, right? And I was asking the doctors like all the way till they were like 5. Are you sure? Do they need to be tested? Are you sure? Because they're very sensitive. They're very intrinsic. They are very engaged. Like they are on it, you know.
Super.
One
Who's
of
their
my sons,
mom? Who's their mom again?
right. But the fact is that and they're very intelligent, right? But they're also very sensitive, and so they are on the spectrum, right? They're on those bookends,
Right.
and just knowing that I don't have to autocorrect them.
No,
I
you
just
don't.
have to continue to embrace them, and you know, and love them, right? And
Right.
even,
For
you
who
know,
they are, not for who they're not. Yeah.
this has been like really, because that has always been my thing. Like, we're walking around without diagnosis. We're walking around without the labels. We don't have the help we need, you know. And it's really, I appreciate that. This was really good. This was good
So
stuff.
one of the things about these kids is that they're made wrong for not being able to, quote, focus and concentrate, right? And a lot of them can if they're doing something that they love to do, but it's like they have 2 speeds, on and off. And when they're on, it's because they're completely immersed in a favorite thing. And if they're not, they can't. Like so many of these kids need more than one thing to do at the same time. And so letting them do multiple subjects for homework simultaneously, maybe with the radio going or in the middle of the kitchen while you're cooking dinner, whatever. It's like whatever it takes. When it's, I remember one of my brothers, I can't remember, I must have been in grad school because I had to study. And he and his wife had a house somewhere in the mountains so we would ski in the daytime, and then at night I was supposed to study. I could not sit still. And I was up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And at the end of the evening, he started laughing and he said, we took a bet on how often you were going to get up, because it was a wooden floor and I was upstairs and they were downstairs. So every time I pushed the chair back, he could hear, you know, like that kind of stuff. I hated doing that. It would have been easier for me to study if I'd been downstairs in the middle of everything. So remember that for your kids too.
That's so amazing, because the prevailing idea is that it's naughty to be doing so many things simultaneously, right? And for some,
think about yourself.
Better. I get it. I know.
How often do you do laundry, talk to friends, vacuum, cook dinner, like pull weeds, like, you know what I mean? Like all the time.
Yeah.
And we're not. And here's the other thing I tell kids: the best thing that's going to happen to you is you're going to grow up. You're going to get older, and a lot of these stupid rules you're not going to have to follow because you're going to be able to make your own life. You know? I do. I tell them that when they're 8 or 10. It's like, don't worry about it. It's going to get better.
And you're blowing up. We've got a few more questions, it seems.
Okay.
We're at 8 o'clock. Are you game to go for just a tiny bit?
Yeah, it's only 6 o'clock here, you guys. So
yeah, okay. Okay, so Jennifer?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for everything. I have a son who is ADHD with anxiety, general anxiety, much like myself, except I didn't have the benefit of, you know, like Letitia was talking about, having that diagnosis until I was in grad school and struggling and wondering what was wrong with me because I couldn't focus and do independent work. So I'm a huge advocate for giving my son all the supports that really would have helped me as a child tremendously. At the same time, I catch myself often.
How old is he again?
I'm sorry?
How old is he? Your son?
He just turned 11.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, he has an IEP and I have everything in there. I let him do, you know, the schoolwork with the, you know, music on, whatever it is he needs, active stools, all the things that the fidgets, everything I can possibly throw, the kitchen sink, and whatever sticks, whatever works. But I often find myself, and I don't know how to stop doing this, pointing to my own life and saying, you need to get strategies now, because I don't want you to be like me, an adult that struggles with, piles everywhere, or disorganization, or that this isn't done. I want you to get ahead of this. But I feel like I'm giving him this negative kind of frame idea of what ADHD is. He knows I have it. He knows he's aware of it. So I don't really, I don't know how to stop my own self-criticism from spoiling his perception.
Here's the thing. At 11, he has no sense of time. That doesn't happen until late teens. He's still, hormones are about to hit, so put on your seatbelt. And he's got his whole life ahead of him, And for you, I wonder if one of the kindnesses that you could be to yourself is to not make yourself wrong for being disorganized, and to not make your upbringing wrong for not, quote, teaching you. Kids learn very little from us telling them stuff. What they learn is from who we are and how we function.
That's what I'm worried about.
That's what they pick up on. Honey, you are a great mom. Like, don't worry about it. Stop. Don't beat yourself up. Being disorganized is not a bad thing.
It feels like it.
Well, if you work in a world of where perfection is sort of prized, and order is prized, it's ripe with opportunities to make yourself feel bad.
Yeah.
But I can't even begin to tell you. I have piles of stuff, like 3 or 4 piles. I can find stuff in them, and when I can't, that's when I file them away.
Okay.
Does your lack of organization get in the way of your functioning at home, at work?
Yes. Yes. I feel like it contributes to a great deal of the anxiety that we don't need it. We already have enough. We like naturally, but the piles, yeah.
So I wonder if it's not so much a question of getting organized as it is a question of slowing this down, this inner chatter. Gotta do this, gotta do this, gotta do this, gotta do this. Oh my God, that's a great idea. Okay, we can do right, like all that stuff. Whether it's to go swimming or meditate or jump, get a rebounder, an indoor trampoline, or like whatever, but do something that doesn't require thought and self-blame, that you do just because you love to do it.
Yeah, I don't know the last time you saw me ever do anything that I just love to do. So
if you did, what would it be? Like, it took me a while to get back to dancing again. I danced when I was in college, and a year and a half ago I picked it up again after a couple of years of wondering what it was that I would really like to do, and then all of a sudden there I was. So ask yourself and notice, ask the universe to show you, ask to be shown, ask to.
Well, I guess taking care of plants. I'm good at that.
So
yeah, I guess that's it.
Plants,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Give them away. Do amazing presents for Christmas or Hanukkah or Thanksgiving or Halloween or whatever.
Yeah.
Talk to the plants. Right? I have a friend who does that. You're welcome. Like, do a lot of that. Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
Amy, did you have another? Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question, and I think this is something real. It's similar to what Jennifer expressed, and I personally, and I know a lot of families that I advocate for have expressed, especially when, when you're going out and about, to a restaurant or to shopping with your child, and society kind of sees a difference, right, of your child, either your child behavior or their tendencies of, like being stimulated by certain things or just talking or just babbling, right? And I know when, my son was younger, we would have this fear of even going into into the restaurant, right? Because a lot of times, like, if other
Amy,
people,
can I stop you for a second?
sure.
It brings up the idea that somehow life needs to be normal, and the definition of normal is what everybody else does. What if normal varies from household to household, family to family, kid to kid, age to age? And if your child can handle being in a restaurant, take him to a restaurant. If he can't, don't, and don't make yourself wrong.
But I think it's also the other way, right? It's because I've heard where parents, they were told, like, your child is getting too loud. We can't have you and we can't serve you in the restaurant, right? And is the expression of, if either you're comfortable expressing that, yes, my child is, a child with ASD, or not sharing with others so that, because you still feel uncomfortable what people's reaction would look like. And I think for a lot of parents, it's like, if I have this fear that the reaction of that, them not accepting my child, therefore I'm not comfortable being in this space, right? And then
So don't go.
they just end up really feeling that anywhere they go is a place that they just can't be. Because I know from a lot of parents, they say, I can't go shopping, I can't go to a restaurant, I can't really go anywhere unless if I have to go I have to have a babysitter for my child, right? But then we're also teaching our kids, like, how to be inclusive, how to be just like everyone, and how special they are. But when society kind of has this way of reacting, I guess, not just as a label, but just what you're doing or your child is doing. Sometimes it's just like the tap of your finger when you're doing on the table in the restaurant, and some people just get annoyed, and I think your instinct was just like, oh my God, this person is going to start yelling at me or start cursing at me, and therefore I have to leave my kid. And then I just, I think some people feel uncomfortable. I know at one point I was very uncomfortable of, like, expressing, hey, my kid is ASD, because I felt like if I was sharing one person, I was kind of sharing the entire world.
So Amy, do what works for you and for your child, and don't bother with what other people think. And you phrased it so beautifully before. You talked about baby steps, right? Take baby steps. You would never teach an infant to drive a car, right? There's a lot of change that needs to occur over time. It's the same with your child, with whatever it is, whatever the differences are. It may be that going to a restaurant today is too much, but tomorrow could be fine. But I know personally that if I worry about what other people think about me, I'm like a magnet for every judgment that I sort of pass along the way. If I don't care, I don't even notice the people that are judging me, right? And like with my dog, I just put my speaker on. I haven't fed her yet and she's mad. So she took her squeaky toy and she's like, I don't know if you guys heard that, but I'm like, no. So I just put my thing on and I went like that, right? You do what you do. and anyway, I just admire you guys so much. I admire your courage. I admire your vulnerability. I admire your questions and your willingness to have a look at this stuff. And it's tough stuff. It's tough enough being a parent, but being a parent of a kid who is incredibly different, being a single parent of one or more kids. I mean, all of you, hats off to you. You are amazing. And if you can begin to notice that and be grateful for the gift that you are in their lives, and begin to shift some of that. Oh my God, if only this, and this, if only society, if only I, if only they, if only this, if only that. No, you're perfect the way you are. And you just keep on taking those steps. Okay.
Thank you very kindly. And Maxwell, thank you, New York City Coalition for Educating Families Together. Thank you, everybody. What an amazing conversation.
Thank you all. Thank you, Sarah Jane.
So beautiful.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for being here tonight. And Maxwell, it was a gift to have you with us. Sarah Jane, a gift also, and thank you for the recommendation. If you would tell us the name of the book one more time so our public can remember.
Yes. And
it's called Would You Teach a Fish to Climb a Tree?
That's right, guys. So go out there and find it and read it to help you continue to raise your beautiful children. And honestly, I learned a lot. I learned so much today. And although my youngest son is not diagnosed, but I saw a lot of things that I'm like,
I know, right? Like,
and I have to share, I was the kid, and maybe I should have been diagnosed, but I was sharing with a principal the other day that as a kid, in order to do my homework, I needed the music on, I needed the TV on, I needed noise all over the place because I could not concentrate without all of that going on.
Right, exactly. Exactly. My case in point. Thank you.
Yeah. And my parents finally gave up because, you know, they grew up in a way where you had to have total silence in order to do work. And I came home with good report cards all the time, but I couldn't study in silence. The house had to be rocking.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Yeah.
So,
all right, you guys, be kind to yourselves, and thank you.
Thank you so
much.
much.
We posted your podcast. We posted your book. We posted your website. We're so grateful.
You're awesome. Thank you so much.
And I will see you guys next week with the excellent, legendary Pedro Noguera to speak about, you know, education for kids in underserved communities. And we'll also see you next time, the week after that, I believe, with Cindy Hook Thomas, where we'll be talking about safety in the schools and in the community. So with that, everyone have a good night. Love you all. Have a blessed evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Everyone, have a good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.